Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Farrows of Hollywood, Their Dark Side of Paradise, by Marilyn Ann Moss, narrated by Hilary Huber. So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. F. Scott Fitzgerald, The Great Gatsby. A vagabond, he came out of nowhere and blossomed literally overnight into one of the highest salaried writers in the film colony and a real social light. Wherever there was an elite dinner or a grand opening or a blue blood revel, he appeared escorting some of Hollywood's most famous beauties. He was everywhere: the Mayfair, the Coconut Grove, the exclusive Academy dinners. A handsome young man of Teutonic features, with light hair clipped short, steely gray eyes, and something Prussian in his erect bearing. He always impressed one as being cruel. No one seemed to know much about him. No one does now, although there are vague rumors of a deep, dark past. Hunted Men of Hollywood, Modern Screen Magazine, July 1933. Introduction. Director John Villiers Farrow came into Hollywood the same way he went out. A mystery, an unsolvable puzzle whose pieces never fit together into an understandable whole. Yet between the time he showed up in Los Angeles in 1927 and the year he died of a massive heart attack in 1963 at the young age of 58, the Australian-American Farrow wrote and directed over 50 films, most of them memorable, even classic. Great sea chases and high seas adventures, westerns that were quirky in their boots, and most famously, some of Hollywood's greatest film noir classics of the 1940s and 1950s, including the masterful The Big Clock, the shadowy Alias Nick Beale, and the psychotically tinged Where Danger Lives. But John Farrow left something else behind, a nearly 30-year marriage to actress Maureen O'Sullivan that produced 7 children, including actress Mia Farrow, who would go on to keep the family name public, something John Farrow would never have wanted or imagined. For him, there were reasons to stand far back from the limelight of a gossipy town, shrink from the glitz, the glamour, and the seduction of the spotlight, and instead stay behind the camera. He had secrets, dark parts of his soul that he kept hidden from others, even as he made them suffer for them. John Farrow, a tormented soul who had little idea of the extent of his psychic pain, had little awareness of the pain he caused his family or the legacy of trauma he left his children when he departed their lives. But his daughter Mia, closest to John Farrow in spirit and love, made them public without intent, without malice. Father and daughter hold between them the gamut of the Farrows' fascinating and conflicted lives that played out over several decades in Hollywood. This book, a biography of the Farrow family, charts their double lives. As Hollywood royalty, the family created a fairy tale public existence, but behind that exterior lay an often dark world touched by psychological turmoil, pain, even tragedy. When John Farrow died, few people outside the family knew the interiority of the man, the inside narrative of his family. It wasn't until his daughter Mia Farrow accused her partner of many years, Woody Allen, of sexual misconduct that the Farrow family secrets slipped into the public eye. In telling a story about Woody Allen's behavior with his children, Mia unwittingly revealed her own relationship with her father, who left a legacy of pain, trauma, even tragedy to his children years earlier that continues to affect their lives and the lives of future generations of Farrows. To understand the story Mia tells, we must first understand the teller herself, Mia. Yet, in order to understand Mia, we must first understand her father, John Farrow. This biography of the Farrows takes up the task of looking fully into their lives, for history's sake, and for the sake of stories we tell, the stories that keep us all connected to and implicated in each other's lives. I intend neither accusations toward nor support of Mia Farrow, the Farrow family, or Woody Allen in this book. My interest lies with understanding some of the psychological warfare that embraced the Farrow family. This biography addresses the phenomenon of psychic trauma, meaning the psychic wounds that, unfortunately, occur all too often in our human condition. We are vulnerable souls, lest we ever forget that. In this book, I also discuss two distinct kinds of facts: historical facts, which are facts, feelings, behaviors that exist in the social world that can be documented. The other kinds of facts are those that stem from an analysis, an interpretation of the unconscious life of these family members. They are true to the narrative in someone's mind, but they are not required to be historically accurate. Instead, they are part of the language of the unconscious. They are notable, but they are not necessarily consciously intended by the people I discuss. Yet they have more truth to them than anything consciously said, done, or felt. The language of the unconscious has a logic of its own, a truth of its own. It is the most accurate means of understanding anyone. I have not created these facts, have not imposed them on the family, or mistakenly credited them to the family. I have instead recovered them by knowing the people I describe. Part 1. 1. A Hollywood Family. History, like trauma, is never simply one's own. History is precisely the way each of us is implicated in each other's traumas. Kathy Carruth, Unclaimed Experience. In February 1992, actress Mia Farrow let herself into boyfriend Woody Allen's apartment with her key and entered his bedroom. Glancing at his dresser, she discovered something that no doubt shocked her. Photos of her 19-year-old adopted daughter, Soon-Yi Previn, naked and smiling for the camera. Looking at her daughter's naked body on display was enough to crumble Mia. But who was Soon-Yi smiling for behind the camera? Of course, it was Woody. If the shock didn't topple Mia, what would? Woody was not Soon-Yi's father. Then again, he was. Although not yet in the picture when Mia and former husband Andre Previn adopted Soon-Yi, Woody was now Mia's partner of 12 years, a reluctant participant in Mia's strong desire to create family around her. The way Mia, and most of society, saw it, if Soon-Yi was Mia's daughter, was she not also, by proxy, Woody's daughter? Living with unspoken yet well-defined social codes, were they not as good as carved in stone? Woody had just made a huge mistake, a wrong turn. He'd crossed the line. Worse still, he'd betrayed Mia. That kind of betrayal breaks your heart, pulls the ground out from under you. You don't recover from this one. As it turned out, that day was just the tip of the iceberg under Mia and Woody. Mia's private discovery became everyone's public information, but not without her help. In August 1992, Mia Farrow held a press conference and accused Woody Allen of molesting the child they had adopted together, 7-year-old daughter Dylan Farrow. According to Mia, this news came straight from Dylan's mouth. No coaching, no interception from Mom had occurred. This news story thoroughly captured the imagination of men and women everywhere. So completely seduced the global media that it was nothing less than the creation of another universe in which all Mia-Woody news junkies could coexist peacefully while taking one side or the other. 30 years later, since closing out one century and ushering in the next, little has changed. Various events and disclosures helped to blow it up in 1992. Woody soon announced that he was having an affair with Soon-Yi and that they were in love. Time and again, Woody denied that he'd done anything to Dylan. His denial never wavered. One investigation after another failed to find any evidence that Woody ever molested Dylan. Was this true? Was this retaliation for Woody's betrayal of Mia with Soon-Yi? The news gathered steam, then grew larger than life. These were celebrities, after all, soon to become legend, as their sad story eventually gathered momentum from the mood of the soon-to-be #MeToo movement. It was an issue that now fed itself on the demand that centuries of female suffering can be recognized and that retribution be doled out to males everywhere to compensate for their long history of physical and emotional crimes committed against women. The never-ending circle. Eventually, the Woody-Mia fiasco established boundaries between warring neighborhoods of thought. Mia's supporters, of which there were many, on one side, Woody's supporters, mostly nonverbal, on the other. For years, darts and arrows, damning accusations, exploitive headlines, and endless photo ops flew from one camp to the other. Through it all, Woody was never legally charged with any crime. Now and again, larger events popped up to breathe new energy into the battlefield. In 2014, for instance, the Hollywood Foreign Press Association bestowed its prestigious Lifetime Achievement Award on Woody for his body of work. Ronan Farrow, Woody and Mia's biological son, took offense and then took to the media to voice his outrage that a child molester, such as his father, be rewarded for anything in this life. Then, Ronan himself made headlines after publishing an investigative piece in The New Yorker in 2017 that outed movie mogul Harvey Weinstein's sexual harassment of film industry women that had secretly taken place for years. Ronan won a Pulitzer Prize, and Weinstein went down, taking with him a huge assortment of other male sexual predators in the #MeToo movement that swept across the globe, catching every powerful male in every variety of business who could be named as an abuser of women. Then, in 2021, HBO aired a documentary, Alan v. Farrow, 5 years in the making, that once more pumped new life into the Mia-Woody fiasco. The producers kept their work under wraps for those 5 years. When small-screen audiences first heard about it, airtime was in no time. The documentary seemed to have suddenly appeared out of nowhere. But Alan v. Farrow turns out to be a full-fledged work of art, heavily armed with weapons of mass conversion. Looking more like a romantic melodrama feature film than a documentary, it pulls out every possible conceit of fictional film. Seamless editing that makes the spectator feel as if he or she is in an alternate romantic universe that is just as real as the one outside the screening room. Lush romantic background music, impeccably plush background and homey foregrounds, Mia's Connecticut home called Frog Hollow. Most importantly, sitting front and center most of the time, Mia herself narrates a woeful tale. How Woody Allen, a sophisticated manipulator of all media tactics, duped her, Mia, an unsuspecting innocent who hadn't a clue of what was going on behind her back. Daughter Dylan, 7 years old at the time of the alleged molestation, supposedly needed no coaching from her mother or any other of their friends who confirmed that Mia's tale, her accusation, is the whole truth and nothing but. Despite the documentary's huge, seductive, and beautifully crafted arsenal, the weapons of mass persuasion, the narrative tilted toward Mia's innocence, no drumroll was heard after HBO aired its 5-part piece of propaganda. No mass conversion to Mia's side of the court could be felt. Her people had always been on that side of the net. No matter the ratio, it still remains that, after 30 years of verbal warfare along with the chill of a Cold War, even as the players grow older and move on with their lives, there is still no closure, no conclusion to draw about Mia and Dylan's accusations or Woody's ongoing claims of innocence. No formal investigation has turned up any evidence that Woody molested Dylan. What's more, no verdict looks likely to be coming around the corner. There is no new evidence or information, no change to be seen on the horizon. Has the evidence pointing to Woody's guilt been stolen? Has it been so expertly manipulated by his handlers that it looks to have disappeared? Or has it never existed? Have the last 30 years been nothing more than one person's narrative, and a fictive narrative at that? In 2018, Mia and Woody's adopted son, Moses Farrow, one of Woody's staunchest supporters, went viral. He put his blog on the large map of social media and reiterated that his father, Woody Allen, is innocent and has been from the get-go. He went even further, claiming that, in truth, his mother, Mia Farrow's story, is fakery. In fact, he says, Mia is the abusive one in the family and has been so for years. And once asked by a slightly slanted news reporter how he could not have seen anything at all between Woody and Dylan, Moses answered, "How can you see something that never happened?" Well, you can't. But it's not quite that simple. The storyteller never lives separately from, or even far from, the story. You can try to separate the two, but you can never sever one from the other. Going further, what if the teller of the story sees no difference between the facts and the story? They are very different from each other. Mia Farrow is the progeny of a family of gifted storytellers. Living inside a narrative, a story, was natural to them. There were always facts, but they made stories from them. Telling stories and performing them in public on the movie screen, or on the stage or for television, was no less familiar than writing or directing one. If life were a script, the stuff of stories, it would be understandable. Both her parents were Hollywood storytellers. Her mother, Maureen O'Sullivan, acted them out on the big screen. Her father, John Farrow, spent his life's work, his lifeblood, in the act of creating stories as a writer and film director. John Farrow grew up inside his imagination. He never had a choice about it. Abandoned as an infant by his father and his mother torn away from him, he grew by any means he could. He lived his life in stories and adventures. He had to create a foundation and context of his own making, mixing fiction and fact to replace the family he did not have. This suited him well when he arrived in Hollywood. But for some, it's too easy to confuse the real and the fictive, to fail to distinguish between the two. It might be entirely possible that John Farrow, having grown up so isolated in his own imagination and the world he by necessity had to invent in absence of a familial one, created the narrative of his own life to tell others, no less than himself, replacing the fictive story as real, replacing the facts themselves with stories. Farrow's failure to distinguish between the two seemed compatible with his wife Maureen O'Sullivan's instincts as a movie star. Her long relationship to the Hollywood publicity machines was by nature based on telling public stories to shield private, personal lives. Talking to Hedda Hopper or giving an interview to a popular woman's magazine was, by definition, a performance. It would be complexly understandable if her life with John Farrow quickly transformed into 3 decades of posturing as happy, when in fact living with the woman chasing John Farrow was often tormenting for her. In turn, the Farrow children were mostly silent about their home life. But, as Mia later wrote, Hollywood thought the family lived a fairy tale existence. In truth, a nightmare often lived there too. Complexity ruled. John Farrow could easily be his daughter's intellectual mentor, teaching her by example how to master the art of storytelling. She loved this father who told stories, who filled her mind with adventure. Yet he was also a father who beat her and placed his Catholicism on the family like a great burden. Just as every Hollywood movie has a script and a backstory behind it, so too does every story, no matter who tells it, have a pre-written script and backstory. More often than not, these remain unseen, unspoken, and unknown. In the myriad of stories and scripts that emerged from and that have flown around Mia Farrow's accusations against Woody Allen, one story has remained left untold. The possible backstory to, and connection with, Mia's own childhood. Her childhood, much like all of our childhoods, could very well color the way she sees now, and the way she lives her life and talks about it. The Farrow home was hardly a fairyland. In truth, it was a tense, rigid, tightly wound, and religiously bound environment where the children hardly saw their parents and spent many hours at parochial school and later Catholic boarding schools. Play became urgent, a lifesaver. It hardly numbed the pain of John Farrow's frequent and unpredictable anger. It hardly numbed the sting of his physical and emotional abuse of his children, but play became part of the landscape, as we shall learn. Yet, the man who would eventually beat his children was also the man they looked up to time and again. His frequent absences from home when directing a film on location, coupled with his emotional unavailability when he was present, only made him seem more urgently desired. For Mia especially, who followed him into show business, who remained closest to him in spirit and in emotional likeness, John Farrow, who died when Mia was 17, was Mia's closest emotional mentor, even ally. Keeping her father alive in her life, while it might have been unconsciously played out, could very well have been the undercurrent in her storytelling, perhaps even her life's work. Mia is irrevocably tied to her father. John Farrow shaped Mia's life. She is his manufacture. To understand Mia and her childhood is to discover the untold backstory, even perhaps the psychological motivation behind her accusation against Woody Allen. Yet to gain any understanding of Mia, to know Mia, it is first necessary to understand John Farrow. Where Fairy Tales Begin. The story of the Farrows as a family begins in post-war Los Angeles, a city whose particular landscape and lifestyle directly influenced their everyday existence. It was a time when many World War II veterans left the East Coast and brought their families west to take advantage of the city's still wide-open spaces, rapidly closing in. Los Angeles was experiencing a housing boom, attracting people from all parts of the United States who now took up residence in the City of Angels. The biggest draw was, of course, the movie industry, which had long ago taken over the city and by now defined it. The industry continued to attract a nonstop flow of people from all around the United States and Europe, anyone who wanted to taste the glamour and excitement of Hollywood. And as glamorous and exciting as the movie industry might seem, its real business was to perfect the art of dreaming. You could dream, imagine, and then create any version of yourself and the world around you that you desired. Eventually, the two might even merge into one coherent space and become the reality that never faded. Beverly Hills, the birthplace of all the Farrow children, was the Emerald of Los Angeles, a city founded by famous movie people such as Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, Charlie Chaplin, and Will Rogers. By the time the Farrows became a family living in Beverly Hills, the city had long enjoyed the reputation of being home to the wealthy, the successful, and, of course, the famous. More than anything else, the enclave housed the stars who appeared in the movies. How so many lives with so much imagination could fit inside Beverly Hills' small parameters was a marvel. But famous faces were only half of the city's stories. Some West Coast families had roots going back generations, families having built lives as farmers, merchants, and cattle herders. Still others were transplants who came to see if they could build a life on little more than a dream. Some stayed only as long as they could. Others could think of no better place to be, as new decades descended on the city and the simpler days faded forever. Life in Beverly Hills in the 1950s felt more intimate, seemingly more innocent than any time since. This was a family town, and the warm climate brought people outside where connections between people seemed easier and more casual. But change would, of course, descend on the city. Innocence would be more difficult to claim. As more tourists came to visit each year, the city always gave them something to look at. If you turned south of Beverly Hills proper, you'd find the Celluloid Monument, a large piece of marble with the likeness of 8 Beverly Hills citizens carved into it. The 8 were famous movie people who, in 1928, fought the big bad city of Los Angeles, which was swallowing up this small patch of heaven. These citizens, like the majority of those to settle there, were movie stars, celebrities, famous names with plenty of money. They were film industry pioneers like Douglas Fairbanks, Mary Pickford, Charlie Chaplin, and the city's first mayor, Will Rogers. The Celluloid Monument sits at a busy and auspicious corner, Olympic Boulevard and Beverly Drive, where the light turns red and seems to stay that color for 5 long minutes, making drivers a captive audience, forced to look at the figures and the words carved at the bottom. But it's not a glitzy monument, so it leaves no impression on tourists and errant locals. The same cannot be said of the many locals who are members of the film community. The monument reminds them of who they are, what dreams live inside them, and how they spend their lives making movies, worshiping movies, even feeling fed up with movies after spending so much of their lives with them. They are the movies. It's no mystery. It's just a fact. And so it was back in the 1950s. During weekdays, not unlike any other city with business on its mind, Beverly Hills' streets bustled with board lunches, corporate handshakes, and harried jaywalkers trying to get to them. But on weekends, the locals could take time to think of themselves as regular folk. On Sunday evenings, as dusk descended on the city's palm trees and bougainvillea vines, washing the city with romantic pink and red hues, entire families would walk out their front doors, past their impeccably manicured front lawns, and take to the streets. You'd see them enjoying a leisurely stroll, maybe window shopping along Rodeo Drive or Dayton Way, as many of them made their way to Sunday evening dinners at a favorite restaurant. To a visitor passing through town, this flow of friendliness, the warm sense of community and family, could rival any heartfelt sentiment an MGM Andy Hardy movie could cook up in the 1930s. At this hour, restaurants welcomed their regular customers as if they were family. Cuisine from any country could be found. If you wanted to eat spaghetti, you'd find yourself waiting in line on almost any street in the area. If you happened to like more exotic dishes, you might find a table at the famed and pricey Trader Vic's, or brave the crowd at the popular Luau restaurant on Cannon Drive in Brighton. Despite its small radius, Beverly Hills seemed to offer a plentiful bounty. On Sunday evenings, you'd walk down any of its avenues and see families entering the numerous eateries that dotted the streets, each unique in atmosphere and cuisine. If you went inside of them to wait for a table, you might look around the dining room and spot a number of recognizable faces you'd seen on movie screens or on television. Families took up many of the larger tables. The atmosphere was relaxed. The patrons chatted to each other as they ate. If you gazed more closely, your eye would undoubtedly stop at one particular family of 9 sitting quietly reading their menus. It might have been the Farrow family. Their faces were handsome, even beautiful. You wouldn't be the first to notice this. The 7 children and their mother, actress Maureen O'Sullivan, might have waited for director John Farrow to call the waiter to their table and order, and they paid little attention to stares from others in the dining room. They were called the pretty ones, the beautiful Farrows. For many, especially those who knew them from a distance, the family must have lived a fairy tale life. After all, they had looks, money, and movie star prestige. Yet the real facts can be very different from what we imagine them to be. Looking at the beauty and reserve of this family, who could have guessed that the Farrows, now sitting quietly in a Beverly Hills restaurant, lived in a world that could hardly be described as a fairy tale? And who would have ever anticipated the sadness, the trauma, the tragedy that awaited this family in the years to come? John Farrow was one of Hollywood's busiest directors. He'd worked in pictures since the late 1920s, rising to prominence very early on. Yet, even though many of the people seated in this restaurant had worked with him at one time or another, even frequently during those 30 years, probably no one could tell you they knew much about him, who he really was. His co-workers at the numerous Hollywood studios around town could not say they understood him, even if they'd worked with him regularly. Nor did any of John Farrow's immediate family truly understand him. Farrow was a mystery to the Hollywood community, and even to his wife Maureen O'Sullivan, and to his 7 children. He may as well have been the king of a magical yet distant place in a fairy tale from a long time ago. Of the myriad of publicity photos taken of the Farrows, in one after another, One can look closely at his face to see a distant look in his eyes, as if he were caught up in a different place or unreachable state of mind, where no one else could enter. Actor
Sample complete. Ready to continue?